biggest thing, why am I carrying a gun? Carrying a gun because I want to prevail in violence. This is super simple. Why? Because I don't want to die. Why don't you want to die? Because I like living. Well, you can't shoot a heart attack. You can't shoot diabetes. You can't shoot cancer. You can't shoot high blood pressure. I can't do a sub-second draw stroke and shoot osteoporosis or any of these things. And so it's a dichotomy of thought, and it's a fallacy. And I think most guys just want to play with guns, and it makes them feel like badasses. And they don't really care about living. They care about having a gun, and that pisses people off. But if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I think if you care about yourself, you're going to eat the right foods. You're going to do the right things to keep you healthy. And then I think most important, all the stuff we've been talking about, your kids are going to see that.
What a treat to be with the legend, Harry trainer, Mickey Schuch. You are such a great guy. Before we even start, I want to say this episode is sponsored by the amazing Ignis Coffee. Please look at my shirt. And you were kind enough, we're going to put a link in the show notes. You were kind enough to send some. And Mickey, this stuff is good. I'm blown away. It's really great. So thank you, brother. And what a treat to have you.
I appreciate that. You definitely did not have to pitch the coffee, but I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
So, brother,
you probably got some Folgers in that cup right now, don't you?
Folgers? What's that?
That's like the biggest coffee brand in the world. It's like, you know, Folgers?
Oh, I don't even know. No, this is
part of waking up.
I just no, this is Ignis. I just made a cup. It's really good. So I took my son he went to see a new pediatrician. We moved from Chicago to Indiana, so we're seeing this a bit more holistic. And the one thing she said is, both you and he still has milk, not very often, but he's 3 years old. He probably shouldn't be having milk. And they said, you got to get rid of dairy too, to Jen and I. So I'm like, man, this might be my last cup of Ignis coffee with cream, and I'm just going black.
It's for all of you, no cream.
Yeah,
no?
she was just saying dairy's just not good,
I am interviewing a doctor I found online, and I don't know a ton about it, but I found a video of him talking about dairy and A1 versus A2 milk, which is something to do with not just the species of cows, but some genetic mutations. And apparently the A2 milk, which I had some cream that I bought from a small creamery, was they advertised all over the bottle. It's A2 milk. So I'm like, what the heck is that? So I did some research, found this guy, and it's closer to human breast milk, which people know goat's milk is better for you than cow's milk because it's closer to the human type of milk. And I'm not a scientist, but anyway, this doc, I can't think of his name for the life of me. I'm interviewing him next week. Did this very easy to understand discussion on it. And a lot of the problems people have eating yogurt, cheese, all that crap is because our body can't digest it. And he said, one of the interesting things is we say I'm lactose intolerant, or I must have a problem with lactose, but it's not the lactose. It's this couple of other components of the milk that our human gut just can't do much with. So anyway, I don't eat a lot of dairy myself, but I do like a nice heavy cream in my coffee.
I mean, little eggs on my little cheese on my omelet and coffee in the cream definitely it's gonna be tough to give up. But no, the way I understood it, Mickey, is we're not baby cows, so we shouldn't be drinking milk. That's the way I understood for adults. But it's so funny how things just get put in society as normalized. If alcohol was tried to get reintroduced today, there'd be all these laws oh, it's so bad, you can't have alcohol. Because we've been drinking for so many centuries, it's just part of the culture. So I always found that so interesting with the marijuana alcohol debate from the way I understood it. And definitely anecdotally, a little bit of marijuana in the evening has only positive benefits and I sleep great. Alcohol wrecks me, 2 days, I don't feel great. But it's like when you go out, if you don't drink, I quit 6 years ago. If you go out, people say, they're almost well, why don't you drink? As opposed to, well, why are you getting hammered 3 times a week? It's just funny how certain things get accepted in the culture, like milk.
You don't have to get hammered though. I love 2-3 nice beers. I feel great. Wake up. I don't feel poorly.
I think it's your body processing, because even one glass of wine, I'll feel sluggish the next day. I think my body just doesn't process alcohol very well. So yeah, I think that's the key.
Alcohol processing machine then.
No, but that's the thing, Vicky, as you get older, I think you find things in life that agree with you, whether it's the people you want to be around, whether it's the routines you have, whether it's things you put in your body. And if you're not always changing and tweaking, it's kind of a shame, because that's definitely something that as I've got older, it's just, you're just curating your life more and more to do the things you want to do with the people you want to do them with.
Sure.
And that's
I just the other day, a side note to that, somebody was telling me like, I got heartburn ahead. I think they ate their wife was out of town. So they went and got like a big pile of like hot wings and drank like a quart of beer while their wife was out of town, because apparently the guy's not allowed to do that. So he like sat at like some sports bar and ate a huge pile of wings and felt like crap. And we're joking about it. I said, I remembered when I was young, some carpenter I was working with, there was like a little taco stand, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to go run and grab some tacos. You want any? And he's like, oh, heck no. Why would I want to eat that? And I'm like, they're tacos. They're delicious. You know, the free tacos. And I'm eating them. I was probably 18. He was probably 50. And he goes, if I ate one of those, like I had some like verde salsa, he goes, I would literally shit my pants and then be up all night thinking I was having a heart attack. And he's like, you wait till you're older. And thankfully I don't have any digestive issues like that. But yeah, you hear about that stuff all the time.
This is so random, Mickey. You just reminded me. They say one of the secrets to being a good ultramarathon runner is having a digestive system where you can be running and just eating food as you're going, and your body can digest it and not make you feel sick as you're, doing as you keep moving. So who would have thought? I would have thought it was just be athletic prowess, but I wouldn't think that the digestive system would play a massive part. But it makes sense, because you burn so many calories on these 50, 100-mile races if you can't, get it quickly from food as you're a higher exercise threshold and your heart's racing. If that just wrecks your stomach, then that's probably not the sport for you. So
I never thought about that. Yeah, usually I would assume in that state of high output, your body would probably shut digestion down, like in that like fight, flight, freeze kind of a situation where it's just like, we don't need to deal with this. But yeah, you'd have to maybe through training your guts figure it out. I've never done it.
well, Mickey, let's go back, because before we even start talking about what you do, because it's such a big it's something that I do a little bit of, but I really want to get more into it. Can we start with a bit of your backstory? Because I know it's a really interesting one that led you to be the firearms trainer.
Yeah, it's always boring. It's boring to me because I'm mundane, right? I'm not. It's a great way to start a sales pitch here. Hey, listen for the next hour. I'm about to tell you a boring story. And most of the guys that are in the space that I earn a living in come from law enforcement backgrounds or special operations backgrounds. And there's a handful of guys that have none of that, like I do, that teach firearms and some self-defense stuff, but grew up in suburban Chicagoland. And, something my parents probably don't like me talking about, but my life, too bad. Grew up in kind of a weird situation. My dad was a Pentecostal preacher, so had like a kind of a strange home life, like my parents had 11 kids. All my brothers and sisters are healthy and well, but grew up in this space where we had a skewed viewpoint of the world. And according to like my parents, anybody watching, if you, are deeply religious, I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm just telling you where I came from. Like a normal day in my house was prayer meetings before school, Bible studies after school, church 2-3 times a week. And then mixed with that was tons of shame, abuse, fear. Like 8 years old, I remember going to bed at night and I would think about maybe an uncle or something that wasn't saved, wasn't like of the correct religious. And because I was told every day, like, if you don't follow this set of rules, you die and go to hell and burn in hell for all eternity. So I remember a lot of times as a child being like filled with fear, thinking about hell and people I cared about going there, because this was what was told to me by parents. So that's like one side of like where I came from, was like that business. And unfortunately, as a young man in a sleepy little area northwest of Chicago, murder kind of visited my family on multiple occasions, very random. And to this day now, last year, unfortunately, was the 8th person that I knew personally that was murdered. And it's like, it's not like guys I knew that lived in the hood. These are like, it started when I was 15 years old with a girl named Beth Bosworth. And I've told this story on these podcasts, and I will predicate it on, I'm not trying to like use her or her horrible murder to sell me or my business. But what happened was, she was a child babysitting a nephew, and a neighbor decided, after watching her for some time, I think he was about 38, 40 years old. His name was Dale Kauke. Dale went and knocked on the door. This is what the police pieced together. Forced his way in, raped her, stabbed her somewhere around 70 times, and then lit the house on fire while her and her nephew were in the house. The neighbors saw smoke, and they were able to get the nephew out of the house. Beth had so many stab wounds to her torso that her diaphragm was punctured, so she couldn't scream. So the firemen didn't know she was in the house. She had barricaded herself in the bathroom. So she succumbed to the stab wounds and smoke inhalation and died. It took months for sheriff's office to figure out what had happened. There was no clues left. And fortunately, they found out who it was, but the unfortunate way was how they did it. And this, what I'm about to tell, kind of started to shape me as a kid. So this girl was very close with our family, and she spent like holidays with us. She was my older sister Karen's like best friend in grade school. So one of those kids that was like at the dinner table 4 nights a week. Like, we've all had like a friend like that or knew somebody like that. So it was like a not just somebody we knew, but an integral part of our family. And because of that, I went to the trial, and that's where I learned and heard about all the details. So the sheriff's office has no leads. So one of the detectives, a guy I ended up meeting years later, just decides to start knocking on doors. And he says, "Hey, I'm Detective so-and-so from the sheriff's office. I know you heard about what happened to that girl down the block. Do you know anything?" And nobody knew anything. And he started saying this, there's got to be a good explanation as to what happened, knowing there was no good explanation. And everybody would say, "What the hell are you talking about? A kid got killed. There's no good explanation." And one day this guy goes, "Yeah, you're right. There probably is a great explanation for that." And they're like, So they start looking into this dude, and they find this idiot's got bloody clothes. They get a warrant. He's got a pocket knife with Beth's underwear fibers on it. And he just was this dude that decided he wanted to have sex with a young girl and hide his crime. He was liquored up. He was doped up on drugs when he did it. The guy was a volunteer fireman. I don't think he really had any kind of criminal record. He died in jail about a year or two ago. I remember hearing about that. But this like one pivotal moment of my childhood, I remember sitting there thinking, like, what could have changed this? She shouldn't have opened the door. She shouldn't have done this. She should have known how to fight. She should have had a gun, right? Shoulda. And shit happens. Bad shit happens. And so there is no for sure thing, but it kind of flipped a switch in my brain of trust. I remember as a child thinking adults, I don't know if this is true for you, but I remember thinking adults didn't lie or do bad things because adults were the ones always telling us not to do this stuff, right? Maybe about the same time in my youth, a athletic director at a private Christian school I went to got caught absconding with some money from like a athletic fund. And so I started to kind of develop this idea like, shit, maybe adults and parents are not like what they're telling us they are. And it wasn't some like moment where I'm out in the woods, like thinking everybody's bad, but I really became maybe distrustful of what I had been told and what could be taken at face value. So, that coupled with the childhood I had come from, which really that kind of abuse and physical, mental abuse led to a lot of anxiety that as a young person, you don't recognize what it is. I would started developing things like panic attacks as a teenager. And the response from like my parents was, you got to get your heart right with God, shit like that. Not the craziness that surrounds you every day is flipping this fight or flight response inside of you at random moments and causing you to have a 180 beat per minute heart rate while you're sitting in class trying to, study algebra or whatever. And it was terrifying. So all of that stuff kind of led me to, one, understand the human response to stress, not just chronic or acute anxiety, but how we deal with a person trying to break into our house, how we deal with being injured and fighting. And make no mistake, a 15, 16-year-old girl, for the most part, is no match for a grown man, even if he's got no training, right? But like I also, at that point, that wasn't good enough. Like, well, we can't just say too bad and then not try. So that led me down a path for the better part of my life of trying to like sort out some of those things. I worked with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources and their hunter safety program. So I'm a firearms instructor. That's what I do. But that program was really instrumental for me in instilling in me as a 12-year-old boy a respect for firearms, not just as a tool, but understanding that legislatively, Congress, a state house, a county can strip us of our rights to use those if we do improper things. So I really appreciated the men that were involved in that program. I think it's a great program for young people. So later I got involved in it myself, helping to kind of pass on that respect. But long and the short of it, that stuff kind of led to me becoming a lifelong student with a firearm. Not just the martial arts stuff that you and I've talked about in the past, but it's an equalization tool. That little girl is no match for even a feeble man, just by it's a law of nature. You and I know women that are professional fighters. I have 3 or 4 friends that are female UFC fighters, and high school wrestler, 17-year-old kid, probably will do okay against them, right? Or at the least, it's not going to be easy. And I think people forget that. I was just with a guy the other day. His daughters are all in grade school and they have black belts in some Eastern martial art. That's a joke, right? You know that girl, some guy is going to grab her by the throat and slam her into a wall. And that's not me being a sexist or an asshole. It's a law of nature. Our males' hearts are bigger, our lungs are bigger, our muscles are bigger, our bones are bigger, and it's just the way it is. So the equalizer is a weapon, and a firearm is really the easiest way to do that. So I kind of went deep into the weeds on that, what that looks like, how women can access that, or why they should, not just women, but anybody weaker, right? And if I'm using it like you're a once upon a time professional fighter, if you and I met in a dark alley, I hope I have a gun, right? You've got years of training in hurting people with your hands and feet. So a firearm is an equalization tool when what we're capable of physically isn't enough. And I think that's a big problem now because people want to immediately go to a gun because I have this thing, thus this thing is the solution. We're maybe saying, hey, I don't want any trouble with you and I'm going to just leave the space. Maybe is the correct solution. That's a whole nother discussion. But because of these few things that happened in my life as a young man, and then things that happened later, last year, a friend of mine. His name's Kevin Elder. If anybody Googles this, it's rather, it's a kind of a mind fuck. Kevin Elder was a major with the U.S. Army, was a Ranger, came home at Christmas last year from a contract in Africa, training some soldiers in Africa. And I talked to him when he was at the airport in Germany. We were going to get together, do some visiting. Nobody ever heard from him again. He got to America and went to visit an old Army buddy that owed him some money. He never left that guy's property. The police didn't want to look for him, so me and a couple of guys started hunting for him because it was just not normal for him to be missing. This guy that owed him money, whose name was Kevin Elders, so super random, this like same last name but one S, so people like couldn't understand. But what, this guy killed himself? This guy Kevin Elders shot him in the back as he was leaving his house. It sounds like my friend was like, "Hey, you owe me this money. You got to pay me this money," and left. And the guy got mad at him, shot him in the back of the head, and then unloaded a magazine into him. Kevin was a big man, so this murderer then chopped my friend's legs off and put him in a plastic drum and put him in the barn down in Kentucky. And what's crazy about that story, lots of things crazy. Here's a man that's well-trained. I met Kevin. He brought me down to Kentucky to do some firearms training a number of years ago. That's how I met him. He was an Army Ranger. He deployed to combat. He was physically fit. He did all the things. He trusted the wrong person with his personal safety. And this stuff happens so often. And I'm not special. I know a lot of people. So maybe the odds of knowing people that bad things happen to them is greater. But that was, again, an illustration of how susceptible we are to violence. A lot of people don't know Kevin, but most of us know who Chris Kyle was. There was a movie made about him, right? Chris was a Navy SEAL, and he was shot in the head I shouldn't say in the head. He was shot and killed while he was on the ground helping a guy do some shooting with a rifle. And I only bring that up because you can have a ton of training, but if we're not aware of what's happening, we can't use the training, right? And that's really become the kind of focus of what I do. There's tons of places to go and learn jiu-jitsu and boxing and Muay Thai. There's tons of places to go and learn how to use firearms. In fact, more than ever to learn that stuff. But my kind of niche is we do the firearms training, but I talk a lot about how we interact in the world around us, paying attention, really. So that seems to be a deficit. And we often, I think a great example of that is you and I go to a restaurant or like a bunch of buddies, and we try to find the table back in the corner, and then we argue about who's going to face the door. And it's a joke because people are forgetting about the window that the car can slam into, and people are forgetting about the hallway to the bathroom and the double door to the kitchen. And how about the rest of the patrons in there? Like we fixate on, like, I call them dip switches. Like, I'm going to pull this lever that if I sit where I'm facing the entrance to the restaurant, I'm good. And then we forget about all these other things. Or, I'm going to go into the world and I'm going to look for the bad guy. What's the bad guy? I got a friend named Todd Fox that's a well-known jiu-jitsu player and does security for like big name people, big bands and professional people. And he talks about the 360-degree world we live in. It's not just here, but like all the way around behind us. And anyway, I'm being long-winded. So by and large, that's kind of the message that we push. The firearm is an equalization tool, but then we got to take in information to be able to use it. Hopefully we never have to. And I think that's a disconnect in a lot of our training. These phones, unfortunately, these podcasts, all this stuff sucks the life out of our ability to just pay attention to the world.
I couldn't agree more. Brother, I'm so glad you said a few things that I really want to highlight. Women that do jiu-jitsu, I give them so much credit. We have a small female team, and they're all just tough, hardworking competitors. And I always try and remind them, because I can see them sometimes getting frustrated when they can't pull off a sweep when they weigh 115 pounds and they're trying to sweep me and I'm 190 pounds. And I tell them, like, I'm nearly there, but my balance is just, quite good enough. I'm also a black belt. I've been training a long time, and I have, 75, 80 pounds on you. So that weight that huge weight disadvantage they're constantly dealing with it's so huge. And you mentioned the little kids with the Eastern martial art black belts. I hate seeing that, because I feel like the black belt it's a level of skill in the art that I just think it gives them too much confidence. And there's so many stories about people that got into martial arts because they wanted to protect themselves, and they invest years in a style that doesn't work, and then they get beat up by some random tough guy, and it's really heartbreaking. And thankfully, but like with the popularity of the UFC and MMA, the popularity of combat sports has grown so much. I'm assuming you see jiu-jitsu schools all the time. I think that the traditional martial art, the attendance and everything, is that the less effective ones, it seems like less people are doing it. Is that? Yeah. So I think it's so, you just don't want to have, I think I always think about the confidence that most people have, the overconfidence they have in fighting. And I've spent my whole life, since I was a week before I was 13, I'm 44, studying, fighting, competing, pushing myself, learning. And the first thing that I would think about if I was having a fight was that if I'm facing somebody, how do I know his buddy's not behind me and about to fucking, jack me from behind? Or
hit your head in. Yeah.
Exactly. Like it's combat sports are great to make you tough and resilient. And I think for me, it was overcoming my inner fear. It was all about self-growth. But as soon as you take the element of fighting outside, like if I was going to get in a fight now, I'm a bit older, the first thing I would do is try and, get a weapon. And just, why not? Like I would just grab the nearest thing. I wouldn't fight fair. I'm not gonna be like the old boxing fisticuffs. Let's go.
Put them up.
Exactly. So I think these are just such good things to remember. And so many people that are trying to sell a product are going to oversell the effectiveness. And listen, I'm such a fan of the Gracies. I think it's incredible what they did coming from Brazil and literally changing. I mean, how many jiu-jitsu schools are there now? How many hundreds of thousands of practitioners around the world? It's incredible what the millions, I think, probably, what the early Gracies did. But Horian, what he said was, 85% of fights end up on the ground. If I got in a fight in a bar or something, the easiest thing for me is a short left hook from boxing. I'm not going to start grappling somebody, especially if there's 2-on-1 or something. It's just, fights tend to devolve to grappling when you're not trained, especially when you have clothes. It's that natural instinct to grab them, isn't it? But in terms of effectiveness, I think jiu-jitsu is incredible for a one-on-one fair fight with no weapons on a field, but do you really want to be rolling around on the floor on a concrete floor with glass and people's feet ready to stomp you on the head, So that was actually, it's funny how you talk about your youth. I had this weird thing, Mickey, when I had a lovely youth, and I heard a therapist, and my wife's also a therapist, which is funny because we talk about this stuff, but I heard a therapist say, everybody has some type of weird issues they're dealing with from their childhood, that some people just have it worse and they're more aware of it. And other people, you may think to yourself, I had a great childhood, but there's always issues in there you have to work through. And it's so interesting now, as a father of a 3-year-old, I just see this sweet, innocent boy, and I want to keep him in his bubble as long as I can. But the two murders that you mentioned just now, they're pretty horrific. And I hear that and I think, at some point, I don't want him to be naive, right? There's going to be that transition where I think it's important for people to know that there's evil in the world. And I think that there are some evil psychopaths. And I've got friends that if I bring that up, he's just like, I don't want to think about that, because it's not nice to think about. But I think it's that weird balance between, I want to go through life in an optimistic, carefree way, enjoying every day, but I don't want to be this very neurotic, nervous, always looking over my shoulder person. But at the same time, I don't ever want to be in a situation where everything that I love can be taken away from me by a psychopath. So it's that fine balance. And, we both live in, I just moved from Chicago, but I'm working in Chicago. By my job sites, people are getting shot in the day. There's so many murders going on right now. And I don't know, I mean, the statistics, I think they are creeping up. I'd love to hear, I'm sure you know more about this than me. But I don't know if it seems like there's more violence, but there definitely seems when you read those headlines where it's like, 18-time repeat offender kills so-and-so. And it's like, man,
right.
maybe after the 15th time, they should have been like, okay, this person's not fit to be free. But you hear all these stories with these very liberal district attorneys where they're just letting people out after multiple offenses, smaller offenses until it's a truly horrific one. So that's one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you, and I'm so glad we met, is this is something that I think I want to spend more and more of my time investing in myself with. Now I have such a, when you become a father, your protection instincts tend to go in overdrive. So now I have this, and my physical capabilities, now I'm in my 40s, I don't really want to be fighting people, hand to hand. My body's a bit beat up, and I know the risks. So why not just put myself in a better position, especially if I'm living in an area where it seems like politically the criminals almost have free reign right now.
Mm-hmm. That thing about the state's attorneys, district attorneys, depending on what part of the country you're in, we elect them. I've been involved in political campaigns with state's attorneys, sheriffs, state reps, state senators, governors, Congress people, city council people, county board people, school board people. I was the vice chair of a political party. Kind of my job was helping raise money, create messaging. I got really sick of it really quick. After about 5-10 years of that constantly, I got really tired of it because most of the people deeply involved in it don't have the skill set or the aptitude to be the ones making policy. Kind of like if you live in a building that's got an association, the type of person that wants to be the president of that association is usually not the person that you want being the president of that association, right? It's some weird power-tripped person. In fact, I lived in one of these places once where this guy, there could have been a sitcom made about this guy. Like he'd tow your friend's car when your friend came over, even though you had the parking pass. And then he had a sign made that made him a private parking spot, even though it wasn't in the bylaws, just like weird, stupid stuff. And like, that's the kind of person often involved in politics. And in most of us, I have a friend that recently ran for governor in Illinois. His name's Gary Rabine. Very successful, self-made guy, started life, not started life, but like his first career was seal coating driveways. Like the dude with the truck with seal coating dripping down, and he'd come to your house and be like, $50, let me put the stuff on your driveway. And now he's built one of the largest paving companies, roofing companies. It's a pretty big company, Rabine Paving. I met him through politics, and he decided to run for governor, and he didn't win. But he's a multimillionaire, super successful. But guys like that don't have time to play around. And like we had Governor Rauner here in Illinois, self-made billionaire, Ivy League educated. He had the intellect, but he did not have the chops to get people to communicate and like do what needed to be done to get the business of government done. And we look at these things like these super liberal state's attorneys. We voted for them. And people often say, well, I didn't vote for them. Well, you might not have, but you not helping somebody else get elected that's not this idiot. And I'd say that not tongue in cheek. Some of these people are idiots. We have in Chicago, I was with a friend of mine last night who's a law enforcement officer in Cook County. And he just told me story after story after story of these dirtbag career criminals being let back out the same day that they're arrested. And then the stories he was telling was these people committing heinous crimes where people got hurt or killed after they were let back out. And it's demoralizing to the police officers because it's not no big deal for them to do a felony arrest. I have friends that have blown shoulders out. Fighting with somebody, you can get injured, but there's no referee in the parking lot or in a hallway where somebody's trying to hurt you. These guys get even just some stupid stuff like breaking a finger. It's not no big deal to go out and collect these violent criminals and bring them to jail. And then we just let them out. It's like here's a rabid dog. You need to catch this dog and bring it, inside the fence. And every time you got to go catch this dog, you might get bit. Like, you ready to go, Lawrence? Here we go. And then you go get all hot and sweaty and you get the dog locked up and you're like, yeah, I did it, and then I go, hey, get ready. You're going to do it again tomorrow. I mean, why would you? It's idiotic. And we, the people, have allowed that. It's, we've got a sheriff here in my county. The guy that he just replaced was a friend. I helped run that campaign for the last sheriff. The guy we have here now, I think he's a good man. The state's attorney we have here is a good man, but they're single people, and we need county board people. We need judges. People don't think about this. I'm not going to go vote for a judge. I don't know anything about them. Well, you should. You should find out who these people are and find out if they're the kind of people that you want weighing judgment on you. Like, because I mean, we've all probably been before a judge for a traffic ticket, divorce, something. Most of us have been in a courtroom at some time in our life. If not, good for you. But are these the kind of people that you want judging you and your neighbors? And we've got a lot of, I don't care, liberal, conservative. Are they people that understand right and wrong in the Constitution?
Yeah, people of character. I'm so glad you said that, because that's something that's been much on my mind as well. I think there's so much to think about. It's talking about at the beginning, we were saying about how as you get older, you tend to figure out a lifestyle that kind of works for you, and you try and do more of the things that you want to do with the people that you want to do them with. But it's also trying to figure out what you want to spend your time and attention on. And that's something that I've been thinking about since moving to this little sleepy town, Cedar Lake in Northwest Indiana. Is I kind of, it's the last thing that I want to do on one level, because I have no time and there's always 20 things that I want to do. But I do feel some kind of civic responsibility to get involved in some way in the future, because I don't want this to turn into Chicago. The reasons that I left Chicago with the corrupt politics and the crime, and this whole idea. Ray-Ban, paving, by the way, they did a big project for me years ago at a parking lot in one of my buildings. So they were great. But someone like him, that's who I want to be the people making these big decisions, is people that have had lives and careers. And at the end of when they've already had maybe their family's a bit older, maybe their business has done great, then they have the capacity to really give back. That for me is the kind of leaders we should get, not these lifelong politicians. And that was one of the things where so many people just focus on the big presidential election, but the idea of the importance of, like you said, I remember when I voted, the last time I voted, it had all these judges. I didn't know who they were. I think I left them all blank. But it's like, we should really take the time, because, you might not care about the judge when you're ticking forms in an election, because you might just be you might just be trying to vote for the big figurehead that's getting all the media attention. But if you're in that courtroom, you do want that judge who's got morals and they've got character, regardless of party.
Yeah. I had a guy years ago tell me, because I said to him, like, I'm not so concerned. I was helping with some races, and I said, I'm not so concerned with like the city council race. And he said, look, kid, this guy'd been involved in this stuff for years. He's in his 70s now. He was actually one of our state's attorneys, super beloved guy, smart lawyer. He said, think about it like baseball. He said the major leagues have all these farm teams for a reason. And then, the Cubs or whoever, they've got guys at high schools showing up at high school games, they heard about that star pitcher or that star catcher or that star first baseman or whoever, and they go check it out. And then they try to help get these people in the pipeline and get the bench filled, because they're going to need them. And that is a problem. You said career politician. You look at the Kennedys or the Bushes, it's very normal for somebody that has an aptitude for politics. I hate the word politics. I don't hate it, but people say politicians this, politicians that. They're elected officials that are representatives, right? So a mayor is a leader, but he's there to represent, or she's there to represent, the people of a community. That's the same with the president. We have created this idea that the president is like the supreme power. Yes, it's the executive branch of government. That person is still a representative of the people at this high level of government, but we've adopted this idea of democracy. We are a republic. And I think this is the point that I try to drive home with this conversation. The difference between a democracy and a republic has been lost. We use the democratic voting process. I don't want to make this civics 101, but I have people argue with me. I've had people send me like hateful emails. You're a piece of shit to say we're not a democracy. We're not a democracy. We are a democratic republic. It's our founding documents spell that out. And the difference is that I can be in my little home in Alaska, or I can be in my mansion in Long Island, or I can be on the beach in Malibu, or I can be in Kansas. And little old me, this document of the Constitution protects me the same if I'm a billionaire in Malibu or Long Island, or I make $5 a week and I live in, some little town. The Constitution protects me just the same. And we forgot that. And we've got a governor here in Illinois who came from, he's a billionaire. He was born into billions, which I don't think makes you bad. I don't think that people look at that and they say, oh, fuck the wealthy. You're not bad because of money. People misquote scripture and they say or they say money's the root of all evil. The scripture says the love of money is the root of all evil, not the money itself. It's like saying guns are bad. No, misusing guns is bad. And we've disconnected. Should there be term limits? There are term limits. Every 2 years, every 4 years, there's an election. If you don't like it, go do it. So the point I was going to make about a republic, the one thing all of our founders not only fully understood, but they exemplified in their life was this ancient philosophy that the ancients like Plato and Aristotle talked about often. It was called civic virtue. And we hear virtue and we think of like a pure woman or like a religious, connotation. Civic virtue meant that Lawrence cares enough about his community that he's going to do the right thing when old lady stuck in the ditch. That Lawrence cares enough about his community that he's going to raise a son that returns his library book on time and pays his bills and doesn't hurt people. And you vote and you clean up trash when you see it blowing in a parking lot. And you do all these things that you would think makes a good citizen. I shared a video this morning on Instagram and I hated it. I just spent the last 2 weeks researching killers, students that go into schools and do these crazy mass shootings. And I put a YouTube video up on it, and it's just, I'm not a doctor or a scientist. It's just my thoughts on it. And in that, I found a bunch of shit, and I found this video in May in Antioch, which I think is a suburb of Nashville, Tennessee. It's a classroom in high school, and a girl is on her phone. The teacher has a rule, no phones during class. He comes up. You don't see this in the video, takes her phone away. The video starts where the girl's screaming at the teacher. He's like a maybe 30-ish white male. She's a 16, 17-year-old female. She pepper sprays him. She pepper sprays the teacher, and he runs out in the hallway getting pepper sprayed, and he's freaking out. Holy shit. And he's asking other teachers for help. Nobody intervenes, and all the students are laughing like it's a comedy, like he slipped on a banana peel. And another teacher's saying, stop. And she's going, tell him to give me my phone back. Tell him to give me my phone back. And you read the comments after I shared this video, and everybody's got these simple solutions. She didn't get beat enough. The school boards are evil. The president's doing this. And it's like, maybe there's a little truth to all those things. Like somebody raised her. Who bought her the telephone? Who pays the bill? Right? So her mom and dad, and then the phone's not the evil thing. I mean, we're communicating through them. But if you or I pepper sprayed our teacher, we would leave the school in handcuffs for sure. If you or I pepper sprayed a teacher in high school, probably would have got tackled by like the gym coach or some shit, right? I'm not suggesting that this girl should have been tackled, but she was allowed to stand there, and that's assault. And you can't, no policeman or state's attorney I know wouldn't define that as assault and that's like striking somebody to just spray them in the face. They interviewed this teacher, and I shared the little news clip. In the last year, he's been spit on, he's been punched, like there's just like a laundry list. And he's like, for 48 grand a year, I'm out.
Yeah.
Fuck this. I'm going to find a new job. And people blame that on, it's like they blame it on the students. It's all of our fault. Like I am not a fan at all of Hillary Clinton. I remember when her book came out, It Takes a Village, must have been the 90s. I remember hearing people like around my parents, like, it doesn't take a village, it takes a family. And it's like, okay, it does take a family, but it might take a village. Like it might take Lawrence to pull that lady out of the ditch when her family's not there. It might take Mickey to do CPR on Lawrence's son when he falls in the pool and nobody's looking. Right? Like we have this like idea, like it's only the family unit and God, or it's, or everything's government's responsibility. So this idea of civic virtue was if somebody's got a mind to do it, go research this topic and then look at our founders. The 56 signers of the Declaration would be a good spot to start. 56 men that signed the Declaration. They talked about virtue so much that the word, I mean, it's thousands of times the word came up in their letters to each other, in their writings, and erroneously people connect it to religion. There is some definite religious connotations, but they were talking about being a citizen that did your part. We've somehow that's shifted to like, it's all about me and mine, and I got to get me and mine, and everybody else can fuck off. There's got to be some middle ground there.
You just summed up the reason that I love living here. I've got this two wonderful neighbors on my street. This morning, one of them was helping plow the snow from my driveway, so my babysitter could come up because my wife's working this afternoon and I'm working. And it's funny because I'm not a fan of Hillary either, but I actually read that book many years ago. And I agree. I think it takes a family and a village. And I see that with my own, your parents had so many kids that I only have one, and we still have an amazing group of people that are helping shape and raise him. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. That whole, you mentioned the teacher, but also the police. Like, I'm not a policeman, but if I knew from actual experience how hard it is to apprehend some bad people and then they're just released multiple times, I completely understand how dispiriting it must be, and how, like, why would you even care? You get the call. Are you really going to be running there to help when you have an idea of the end is just going to be them getting re-released? It's just, that was one of my biggest pet peeves or hates during the craziness of 2020 was I would go to a lot of these neighborhoods and they would have, defund the police signs in the window. And it just, I'm like, most people putting those signs up are going to be the first people to call the police in any sign of trouble, because I promise you they can't handle themselves.
I do think, I've got a brother that's done quite a bit of research on this topic. As a guy that trains cops, that has a lot of friends that are cops and leadership in that community, I also think that there needed to be some major overhauling. A lot of my cop buddies don't like when I say this, but there was no police in America when we started. It's a new thing. And actually, if you look at the lineage of how police, it was actually, if you study the Second Amendment, there was no armed police. That was not like anything that the founders wanted anything to do with. In fact, part of civic virtue and doing your duty was, if you rang the alarm, there's somebody, hurting somebody, or somebody's robbing the store, part of your duty was for you to grab your musket and me to grab my musket and go run and catch the bad guy. Of course, we've evolved from settlers living in what was the frontier at that time. Things don't stay the same. I'm not against that, but we have allowed policing to kind of grow into something it was never meant to be. Cops are mental health professionals now. I have a friend that just retired from our sheriff's office. He had a kid Mom would call 911 because her kid wouldn't eat before getting on the bus. So he would have to drive there. And this was like 5 years ago. And he'd be like, Timmy, eat your oatmeal. The bus is coming. Well, I mean, that is, and we're paying this guy 90 grand a year and putting gas in the car and fixing the brakes and all that shit. So this car can drive around. Shame on that mother. She should have been charged with a crime for misuse of 911. Right. But like, that's why I say it's not just one thing.
No. Yeah.
It's kind of like, for example, like this school, the tuition reimbursements that the president's talking about. All kinds of people I know are against it, unless that person has a bunch of student debt. Then that person's like, yeah, I don't like this, but if they do it, I'm totally using it. And so like that's what the founders were talking about with virtue. It's character and saying this isn't right. I'm going to pay my fucking bill and I'm going to, not expect $2,000 to come out of everybody's pocket that's paying taxes, because that's pretty much what it is across the board, and understanding that there are ramifications to the greater good. These defund people, you're right, they are the ones calling, as is everybody else. But then these policemen, like we talked about them getting maybe physical injury, breaking a finger, blowing a shoulder out. In addition to that, every time they interdict a criminal, they're risking being filmed, having a misinterpretation of their actions. They're exposing themselves, especially in states like Illinois, now to not only losing their job, but being charged criminally, and being afraid to use real force when it may be necessary. But on the flip side of that, I mean, I have sat in rooms with retired coppers that tell stories about doing stuff that I've heard them laugh about. And I'm like, dude, that's not funny. You guys are literally talking about punching a dude in handcuffs. That was the 80s. You're still a piece of shit, right? And they go, he deserved it. You don't know what he did. And it's like, no, you are not following the rules. And because your culture made it allowed, it was okay to you. And that's the part that I think people had enough of. People had enough of what's good for you isn't good for me, and I can bend the rules. I mean, now it's young coppers. I hear guys talk about maybe getting pulled over in 5-10 years ago. Somebody understanding that they're law enforcement in another community, another state, hey man, drive careful, get the hell out of here. Now those guys are getting tickets. Guys that are driving drunk or something that used to get a ride home are getting DUIs, as they should if you're driving drunk. Guys doing some criminal stuff like abusing a suspect in custody. People are they doing the right thing because it's the right thing, or are they scared that they're going to get caught too? And that's an interesting thing, because that's not the same as character. Me doing the right thing because I'm scared that something's on camera isn't me doing the right thing. And so I think that there was some value in this defund movement, in the sense of it's causing us to reanalyze what we think policing should be. My cop friends can kiss my ass if they don't like it.
Well, Mickey, I'm so glad you said that. That's the second time you said with the school, with the girl in the school pepper spraying, and then with this defund the police. Both times you've highlighted the nuance of these big issues. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with today and social media culture is it's black or white. Trump is going to save us from evil politicians, or he's the devil. Like there's everything, every issue is dumbed down to black or white. And you've highlighted the fact that it's much more nuanced and much more complicated. And I couldn't agree more. And I think that's so important. That's one of the reasons that I like you so much, is that you have the foresight and the intelligence, and you've thought about these issues to know that they are complicated. They can't be solved with a one-size-fits-all policy,
I appreciate that observation, Lawrence. I surely don't know everything, but I mean, think about our own lives. Like talking about, you and I talked a lot about physical health as we age. We've probably all seen some company where somebody's like, buy this supplement. It's Lawrence's amazing anti-aging supplement. You just take it one time a day and check it out. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. There's something that maybe I used to have a company that sent me product of old UFC fighter, hooked me up with them. I didn't want the stuff, but they would send it to me to promote it. And it was like super expensive, like $100 a bottle. And it was like, you slept better. You had better boners. Your hair turned black again. You freaking could run marathons. And it was just vitamins and minerals. But like we think we can just do one thing and like, let's cut out processed sugar and eat more protein and get more sleep and do less phone time and go for more walks and have more sex and whatever.
Exactly. Dude, it's a lot of small things with like incremental increases, right? But the marketing tries to sell incredible benefits from one of the many things you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
a lot.
Well, Mickey, let me ask you, because you've highlighted the fact that people should be more involved with voting and they should have more civic duty and be better neighbors. And I've just been really thinking about these things with, again, being a new father. You were a father when you were much younger, and now you're a grandfather. You're the most virile, handsome grandfather around, which is crazy because you're still so young. But I'm an older dad, so I'm thinking about, how I'm going to try to explain this complicated world to him. And I remember Jen and I were at a dinner with friends, and they said, if you could have one character trait for your son, what would it be? And so me being the Neanderthal I am, I said strength. And at the same time, my beautiful wife said compassion. And I turned to her and I said, sweetie, that's why I married you, because you balanced me out. And I thought that was so beautiful. She's focusing on, she wants him to be compassionate. And we actually got we had a early babysitter that would help us when we lived in Chicago. And her daughter was disabled. And she was so wonderful. She calls my son her younger brother, and she was so sweet with him. And one of the reasons Jen says she wanted him to be around people that were different, so he could see that it's not weird, it's normal. Some people are more able-bodied than others. So she's already thinking, even at that really young age, she wants him to be exposed to this because she wants him to be compassionate. Whereas I'm thinking, my approach is always, if you're not strong, you're just weak, and if you do a nice thing, then you kind of have to do it because you're going to get crushed by society. Whereas for me, real compassion is when you're really strong and you could be a bully, but yet you choose virtue and you choose to be compassionate. That's always the way I look at it.
There's some nuances to your definitions there. Right?
Yes.
Because you could say strength is just nothing will ever hurt you.
Right.
And now but then that comes with makes you maybe calloused and maybe blind to some things.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I mean, mental strength, physical strength, spiritual strength. Yeah, in that sense. Yeah, but I mean, you've been through the fatherhood journey, and you know exactly how beautiful the world is because you're not a cynical person. You seem like you really enjoy life, but you're aware of, like you said, you've been impacted by violent, brutal murders by people you know. What is that balance then with raising him? Like, do you have any advice on how to, like, do I keep him in his little innocent bubble and everything's sweet and it's cuddles and cartoons for as long as I can? And then when he starts to figure it out almost himself, because I feel like, especially nowadays when all these kids, even if he doesn't have a cell phone, his peers are going to have phones when he's still very young. There's going to be crazy porn on there. There's going to be crazy violence, stuff that you and I were never exposed to until we were much older, right? Because it wasn't in your face like it is today with phones and the internet.
Mm-hmm. I saw a video somebody sent me today. I've seen it before. You've maybe seen it. It's a driver filming a boy and a dad running up to his car. The guy has a deer on like the bed of his truck that he killed. It's in Long Island, actually, which is kind of a strange spot for deer hunting, but they must have some open land there where some bow hunting was allowed, I'm guessing. And this kid's tears are streaming. He's got a hockey stick. He's going to hit the guy, maybe 10. And he's screaming, why'd you kill it? Why'd you kill it? And the dad, in like a thick New York accent, big tough guy, you fucking killed a deer. Let a kid see this deer. And the guy's like, hey, take it easy, back up. Like, and it was not a situation he could immediately drive away because there's kids around his car. And he's trying to say to the kid, he goes, do you eat meat? Like, do you ever go to the store and eat meat? And the kid's like, yeah. And he's wiping the tears out of his eyes. And the dad's like, you big tough guy, you're trying to like tell him about where meat comes from. And the guy, the driver, you don't see the driver, but he's trying to explain, and it's only like a 20-second thing. He's like, hey, those animals are killed in a horrific way. And he's like trying to explain this. And I think that kind of illustrates what I'm thinking about. Like, I have a sister that said to me many times, why do you think about hurting people all the time? And I said, I don't think about hurting people all the time. In fact, I think about the opposite. How do I not have to hurt people? I do think about if I had to, like if Lawrence like snapped at dinner, I know Lawrence can fight. So I'm going to pick my dinner plate up and smash it into Lawrence's face as fast as I can. And maybe it will like make him get stunned. And then I'm going to pick the chair up and I'm going to smash Lawrence. I'm going to break the chair on top of Lawrence's head, because I know if Lawrence can get on his feet and get in a fighting stance, I'm probably going to be in a bad way. So that's what I think about, like that. And then that's the end of it. So if Lawrence snaps, he gets like a little bit of like booze in him that he hasn't drank in 6 years, I'm going to smash the plate into. Then the chair goes over his head, and then hopefully he's down. If not, I'm going to have to boogie. Like, but to her, all you think about is hurting people. And this kid has now he's in tears because he has this false idea of what the world is. I used to be involved in 4-H as a kid. My mom and dad, for the things I said that make them seem like bad people, they did a ton of good things too. My father's a musician, exposed us to every type of music ever made. Mom, same thing. But my mom got us involved in 4-H, which you don't know what that is. That's agriculture. And we had dairy goats, shit like that. So you'd be at the county fair. You city folks don't know what happens at these county fairs, but kids basically raise an animal and then they bring it to the fair to show the animal. And then if it's an animal that's consumed, like a cow or a pig, the animal's auctioned off. Kid walks it around the ring. It could be like a beef cow or a hog. And they've raised this animal from the time it was a little baby, which you get attached to it. And then Farmer Lawrence bids $8 a pound and you win. You just bought that pig, and that kid walks up and hands that leash to Farmer Lawrence, who you're going to take that thing home and it's going to become pork chops and bacon. And you watch these kids sobbing because they know this animal that followed them around the farmyard, and they washed it up and combed it for the county fair. And people think, well, that's horrible. All right, well, go eat your fucking tofu and do that. But all life consumes life, and we have, like, in this quest to not create a little bit of heartache for our children. I mean, like, I remember fishing. I don't sport fish anymore. Like, I don't just go like, growing up, we had ponds everywhere, and we would just fish all summer long. And we did catch and release. Call me wrong, but I think that's weird. I wouldn't go out in the woods and just shoot a deer with a blunt arrow and smack its rib with a blunt arrow and be like, could have got you, motherfucker. And that's weird to me. So I don't do that anymore. I do go fishing, and usually if I do, with fish comes home with me and we eat it. I just think it's weird to fuck with an animal for no good reason, to toss it back for sport. People won't agree with me, and we justify it. And I'm not an animal activist. I hunt, I fish. But if you like kind of thresh that idea out, it's weird. So kids, and don't send me any hate mail if you're like an avid fisherman. I don't give a shit. It's just my opinion. I don't do it. We don't, like, does your kid believe in Santa Claus, or will he believe in Santa Claus?
I don't know. That's a great question. This was the first Christmas last month that
he's still kind of at the age like where he doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he realized it was Christmas, and he got a bunch of my friends gave him little gifts. So on the 25th, I said to my wife, I said, baby, let's just save some for tomorrow. Let's not overwhelm him. So we gave him a bunch of presents. And then on the 26th, like, oh, more presents. And then the 27th, he's like, Dada, more presents. And I'm like, no, buddy, this isn't a daily thing. It was Christmas.
Right.
So
how about the Easter Bunny?
No, but exactly.
How about the Tooth Fairy?
I haven't even thought about these things. Yeah, exactly.
So let me finish this line of thought real quick. Like, we are happy to make up lies to our kids. There's no fucking Easter Bunny. There's no, and I love Santa Claus. I mean, just had Christmas and we had Santa Claus stuff. it's a lovely idea. As a child, my parents had Santa come on New Year or Christmas Eve and knock down the door. And as a child, I thought, like, I'd tell my friends at school, fucking Santa was at my house over Christmas break. And they were like, yeah, right, Schuch, you're a fucking idiot. Like, that was, but at 8 years old, 10 years old, the dude would come and he had the costume and the beard and the whole bit. We find it okay for this idea of like perpetuating some social norm that it's okay to make up something that's a complete fabrication. But then we won't explain where meat comes from or that there are bad people in the world. In addition to knowing 8 people murdered, I know a ton of people that have been raped, females. I have several female family members I have several good friends whose daughters went to high school or college or went off to college, after high school and were raped. I know of several guys, one of them still in jail, a kid that came to our church that raped a little girl in the Sunday school when he was 18 years old. And thankfully he got caught, and hopefully that girl finds some way to cope with that and it doesn't ruin her life because now she's an adult. But we find it okay to make up stories about dudes that travel the whole world at night. And I love Santa. But then we don't want to talk about these wolves or where meat comes from or anything else. And I think there's got to be some nuances to that. I think there's got to be a way to do that where we're not what happened to me, where I was filled with constant fear. I mean, I heard about the craziest shit as a kid, the craziest shit that what was weird. I wasn't allowed to watch a PG-13 movie, but I could hear about demon possessed people and just all kinds of weird shit that was not something a 8-year-old or 10-year-old's brain could juggle. So parenting, you asked me a question. What kind of man do you want him to be? Do the things that are going to, I fucked up so much stuff. There's not a night that I don't lay in bed and think of some way that I fucked up as a person that day, but as a father. If I could go back, I'd change 98,000 things I did with my kids. The number one thing would probably be spending more time with them. I spent years involved in the politics thing, and I thought I was doing the right thing at the time because the greater good, this idea of the civic virtue thing. But at the same time, yes, they saw me doing good, but at the same time, I wasn't there. So,
well, Mickey, definitely the idea of when I was at 41, I think, when I became a dad, and I had a new appreciation for people like you that were younger. My parents were younger, and it's so easy. I think it's good in the sense of figuring out your trauma from your youth or your, the things that you were brought up when your brain was so young and malleable to believe as gospel, and it wasn't gospel. I think it's important to recognize that. But on the flip side, you have to recognize that a lot of parents are just kids themselves doing their best. There's no manual. My dad used to say that to me. He's like, Lawrence, there's no manual for parenting. I did my best. And so I don't have any, I joke with my dad. I'm like, I wish you'd got me into sports when I was younger and, but maybe a bit more disciplined when I was younger. I had to figure all that out over time. But I'm so grateful to them for life. I really think that most parents do their best. So we can't judge them. But I really, even just I really like you, Mickey. I know I've said it to you a bunch, but the fact that from this conversation, I'm already thinking now, there were such great questions. Are you going to tell them about the Easter Bunny? Are you going to tell them about these silly fables, the Tooth Fairy that you just, they're ingrained in society, but you're not going to tell him about, when are you going to tell him about the evil? I guess you said, what kind of man do you want him to be? I want him to be a better version of myself. I want him to have all my good qualities, and I want him to have less of my bad qualities, and my wife the same. I want him to have, most of her good qualities, her compassion and my strength, her kindness and my determination, a combination of the two. So I love the idea of treating boys like little adults. Don't think, obviously with a little bit of sensitivity, but the idea of treating him like a young adult when he's young and introducing him to concepts early. I use a random concept that we haven't touched on, but the idea of fiscal responsibility is something that no one really teaches kids. That a lot of people kids go to college and they get a credit card and something from the bank with an overdraft. I know I did. I didn't know the first thing about balancing a budget or thinking about money like that. Like things like that. I'm going to teach my son about delayed gratification when he's young and reinvesting his money and things like that. Like, so I think treating young kids like adults in many ways, I think is going to be the approach that I'm just intellectually thinking it through as we're talking.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. When I was a pre-father, I remember thinking about the things I didn't have, such as, man, if somebody had just got me into martial arts when I was like 13, I'm going to have my kid, he's going to have like 8 black belts and he's going to know how to sword fight, being like a kid. And I'm going to he's going to speak fucking 10 languages and play rock guitar and, he's going to do gymnast shit. He can do backflips. I thought about all the things that I wanted to be able to do. I want to just do backflips, man. I'm going to have my kid is going to never wish he knew how to do backflips. He's going to be able to impress girls and do backflips. Like, I don't know, just stupid shit like that. Well, then it's all of a sudden my son's like, I didn't do any of those things with him, right? It wasn't his aptitude, but if I didn't have the initiative to do that shit on my own, I'm not going to take my kid to go gym class or gymnast school and all that stuff. So it's kind of funny how that stuff plays out. In the end, people grow up to be whatever they're going to be.
My biggest surprise of parenthood is you think eventually, intellectually, I know eventually he's going to become his own man. He's going to do his own thing. But I didn't appreciate how early his own character and personality would come out. So he's not a little me, he's a little him. And my biggest balance is going to be trying to encourage him to do things like jiu-jitsu that I know are going to be a superpower for the rest of his life. But I'm definitely not trying to live vicariously through him, like a lot of parents who never did anything athletic, but they want to live through their kids winning tournaments or something. And so that's one of my biggest things that I'm thankful for being a older father is I spent all of my 20s and 30s doing the things that I wanted to do. So now my biggest thing is like that. There was a John Lennon quote when the teacher was asking all the kids in school what they want to be when they grow up. And he said, I want to be happy. And she said, he didn't understand the question. And John Lennon said, you don't understand life. And I love that because ultimately I want him to do things like we use jiu-jitsu as the example. I want him to do jiu-jitsu because I know all the myriad of benefits that he'll get from it, not just the physical capability of jiu-jitsu, but the confidence, the ability to stand tall, the ability to protect his friends in a physical altercation, all these different things, the idea of a growth mindset, putting work in and seeing the direct correlation of the results. I know all those effects, but ultimately I want him to do it because I think it will make him happier in life. And if for whatever reason he absolutely hated it, I'm not going to force that on him. We'll have to find something else. So I think that's the biggest challenge that I'm thinking about is trying to encourage him to do things that you as an adult and a parent will know will benefit him without, like you said, about trying to make him the ultimate killing machine. Because I think it would be cool if I was an ultimate killing machine when I was young.
Right. Yeah, John Lennon quote. I love that quote. Very British of you to bring up John Lennon, but he said another thing that kind of, I think, encapsulates what we're talking about. Life is what happens while we're busy making other plans. And that's so true. Like all of a sudden I wake up, my kids are gone. I remember as like high school years came, I got divorced very young. My kids' mom and I, it didn't work out. So they did the back and forth thing. And I was very much involved in their life. It was probably hard on them because I wanted to be part of their life. More broke my heart. Like I didn't want to live in 2 separate places and stuff. So they came back and forth multiple days each week. I'd drive them to school. I'd pick them up after school, come home, do schoolwork, have supper, go to Cub Scouts, all that stuff. They probably spent about a quarter of their time with me through grade school years, a couple days a week, and most weekends for years, maybe even a third or half the time some years. But I remember always thinking about like someday things will even out. Like they'll be old enough where they can drive, or there won't be turmoil with their mom, my ex-wife, and that'll be smoothed out. Or I'll have a better house where they can have nice bedrooms, which I eventually got. Well, the same time that I'm chasing to get a nice big house with big bedrooms, they're growing up and making plans of their own. And all of a sudden, one day I found me sitting on my daughter's bed She's gone. She's grown. She's a mom. And there's this empty fucking bedroom, right? Or my son's bedroom with like the proverbial little toy airplane that he hasn't played with in 15 years sitting on the shelf, right? That I bought him for Christmas 15 years ago. And now he's a grown up with a beard and he's got a college degree and he manages a business and he's got a girlfriend that just graduated nursing school. And I look at a little airplane. It's like, shit, this was all my plans. Like, this ain't their plans. Now there's this bedroom of stuff, which now one of them is full of boxes and one of them is a empty room because all that stuff got moved to go to her house. But like, life happens, man. And I look back and like, if we don't enjoy all, like me driving back and forth 20 miles to their mom's house, I'd be angry. I'd drop them off and it made me angry. Like, fuck, I can't be with my kids. They're at their mom's house now. That was my life pittering away in anger or resentment. And that's all gone. Like that was the ingredients that I plugged into the recipe of my life at that time. And that had to have rubbed off on them. They had to have sensed sadness, anger, resentment, all that shit. Because you do if you're around somebody all the time. But we forget all of a sudden, like, look, this business of life is happening even while we're in our head playing other games, trying to make shit happen. So that's the part that I wish and I hope my kids understand and enjoy. My daughter's doing the young mom thing with a little 3-year-old monster. And I try to remind her of that. Just don't think about when she's older. Like, just be now, because I remember thinking once they can talk good, I can have conversations. But then it was like, well, what happened? You were this cute little thing. Like even my granddaughter, I look at pictures. Now there's a picture of her behind this couch hitting me in the head at Christmas. Well, I have a picture of her this big. Like, can I hold her that big again for a minute? No. So
that's such great advice. That's such great advice. I remember one of my friends, older sisters with 4 kids said to me, Lawrence, when they're young, all you want them to do is walk and talk. And then as soon as they do, you just want them to sit down and shut up. But no, the idea of, like, I got emotional just thinking about you in his bedroom, thinking about 15 years probably feels like it just went by so quickly. And that's the best thing. I'm a fairly tidy person, and we did this, I'm 44 and I always lived in condos, and we did this beautiful rehab. And I'm like, finally now I'm a dad and I've got this lovely house on 8 acres and it feels so nice. It's like a dream. And my wife decorated it really nicely. And I have 3 dogs now and a 3-year-old, and there's constantly just, I'm tripping over toys and stubbing my toe on things. And, and it used to, it didn't eat me up, but it would frustrate me a little bit. And then I heard this guy saying, this older dad, he said, when you think about frustrations from kids making a mess, think about how much you're going to miss that mess when they've left. And I was like, wow, that's so true. And ever since then, every time now I trip over something or he makes a real mess, it always makes me happy. Because I'm like, he's still here right now, and he's so reliant on me, and dada, carry me. It's like these little words I'm really trying to just drink in every moment, because I know I'm going to miss it, one day. So that's been amazing for a mind shift, kind of along the same lines of what you're saying. But one thing, Mickey, that I think I struggle with, and I think pretty much all dads these days struggle with too, is what you said is that balance between every time you went and you did your civic duty, right? You tried to help elect people that would make your community better, is also time away from your kids. But, I can't spend 14 hours a day hanging out with my son. There's things that I want to do. So it's that balance between doing things that are going to obviously help your career so you can support a family, but also fulfill you so you're a happy person, so that I am going to be more fun to be around for him. And that balance is very tricky, especially in my business with real estate, where you're very connected to your phone and clients, calling, texting, emailing all the time. It's very annoying when there's always 3 things I've got to do, and my son wants my attention. And that's actually one of my goals of 2024, is be much better about, if people are trying to get hold of me, unless it's a crazy time-sensitive thing, they have to wait when I'm with my son. There's going to be work time, but when I'm with him, I'm not like sending 3 messages quickly and getting back to this guy for 2 minutes, and then I'll, get to him. So trying to just be a bit more deliberate with boundaries is something that is just very difficult with people and cell phones and attention spans diminishing. Because I love that quote. Someone said, you think you want to do all these things for for your son, get a nice house and have nice things and buy him presents. And of course, that's all nice, but really all your kids want is your attention.
It's true. Talking about this civic duty thing, that what bothered me looking back wasn't that I went and helped pound signs in the ground or whatever it was I was doing. The sticking point for me is looking back and thinking about what was my motivation at some of those times. That the motivation was purely, I want to help this guy get elected because it's good for the community. I have no heartburn about that. But when I look back and I think about that, my ego or my desire to be somebody or feel important, or I've sat in rooms with like 7, 8, 10 governors listening to me, and that made me feel important. Or I've traveled and spoke at events where several thousand people were listening to me, and that made me feel important. And then it's easy to say, I have to do this. I mean, I'm doing this no, I was doing it because it made me feel like somebody. I'm a dirtbag, nobody carpenter from nowhere, but now people want to hear what I have to say. And it's easy for me to make the excuse of, I have to be gone. I have to do this. I don't have to do shit. So if I was doing it at the time, I didn't see it for what it was, but I can look back now and see a lot of my motivation was self. It was that there wasn't a purity there, not all the time, but I could definitely understand looking back at why I made certain choices I made at that time in my life, that it was self-motivated. And I think there's probably something with everything, right? You were successful in your trading career. You should be proud of that. That's not, or you're successful as a fighter. You're successful, in whatever it is you're doing. We shouldn't like flagellate and abuse ourselves and be like, weird monks where we had no pleasure. But if I was making that trade-off and somehow telling myself something that's not true, instead of just saying, this makes me feel good, I feel like somebody, this inflates my self-esteem and my value and the way I see myself in the world, that would have probably been better. And instead, you make those trade-offs. And maybe if I understood that at the time, I would have maybe changed some things. And maybe it would have helped me grow as a person. I don't know.
Well, that's very honest, and kudos to you for the self-reflection, because you're right. Anything, even if you were the most wonderful, selfless dad, and you gave up all this monetary riches and prestige and fame to be there with your kids, you're still doing that so you feel good. So, I mean, so you feel good about that identity. So I think just recognizing that is really great. But ultimately, I always think I'm going to be the best parent by being the best me. And that's the balance, is I'm going to be a better parent if I take time to have conversations like the one we're having, or if I take risks at work that pay off, and then I can talk to him about risk and reward in life, and do these things, be an active man in the arena, as opposed to being like, you know what, baby, you're doing pretty well as a therapist. I'm going to be a stay-at-home dad and just follow him around with these toys for 15 hours a day. So it's that fine balance, right?
Yeah, I mean, somebody's got to go plow the field. Somebody's got to split the firewood. Somebody's got to fix the roof. Somebody's got to put tires on the car. I don't have any. I think a perfect example is, I mean, for us guys especially, I can't speak about women because I'm not one, but it's easy to say, like, I'm out here providing. And then we stop at the pub on the way home and drink a 6-pack with our buddies. We go watch the game, and it's whatever it is we're doing, we wrap it around this idea of like, I'm out here working my ass off. We're also doing a lot of bullshit because it allows us to be off on our own. If I'm at the job site, or I'm at the office, or I'm wherever, I'm in the cab of my truck, I'm not stepping on the toys. I think most guys, as much as we love dadhood, we also are still dudes with that like carefree thing in our heart. And it's easy to fall into that trap of I'm taking care of the family, when in reality, you're taking yourself into this, like, I'm not saying single, like you're cheating on your wife or something, but like you're at the office, you're not dealing with diapers and all that kid stuff. So it can also be like an escape too from some of the things that maybe we're not good at, or you know what I'm saying?
100%. I couldn't agree more. Mickey, we're going to do part 2 because I got another 5 hours of things I want to talk to you about. But in terms of you being, a firearms instructor, is it controversial of you when you talk about the idea of people? What do you say? Like when you pee, you should be able to see your dick. Like don't be really out of shape and think because you got this.
That's a weird thing to say, Lawrence.
But Mickey, is that controversial? You say that, or is it a lot of people also have that same mindset as you?
I have had to temper myself in life. I'm still working on it. That's a work in progress for certain. I can be very callous and sarcastic. But I say that for a reason. Guns are cool. I could talk for hours on my feelings on them, but it's such an easy tool to pick up as a self-defense weapon. As is oft repeated, with great power comes great responsibility. That's attributed to Spider-Man, but that was actually said by many others, not Spider-Man, Spider-Man's uncle, rather. But we see dudes that are out there with this idea that I have this ultimate power of self-defense, and then these guys are way out of shape, and it gets preachy because somebody, if they want to eat trash food their whole life and die of a heart attack or diabetes at 48, that's part of what liberty is, right? You see cities like banning sugary drinks, or cities banning or making like the size of a soft drink, a certain dimension. That's idiocy. And this concept of liberty is double-edged. But if we are going to, when I'm really saying that stuff, I'm talking about these like gun guys that are out there preaching the gospel of the firearm, which to me is a martial art. It's no different than striking somebody, but instead of working the mechanics of turning my hip over and throwing my strike, I'm working the draw stroke, or I'm working finding a sight picture and things of that nature. But all the other things of right and wrong still apply. I can't just punch somebody. I can't just shoot somebody. And there's this explosion of firearms training, which is a good thing. The Second Amendment says well-regulated. Well-regulated does not mean, and anybody that challenges me on this, I challenge you to research it. Regulated does not mean regulated in the common verbiage of today. Regulated in the 1700s meant trained. It meant ready. It meant capable. That's what regulated in that sense means. When you think about regulator for scuba diving, what's it doing? It's metering gas flow into your lungs. It does not mean legislation. So we have these guys that are practicing the martial craft of firearm skills, but then they are not living it. And that, I think, is what's lost in what I love about ancient Eastern martial arts. You get this, but like we think of Taekwondo. Do means way, right? The way of, or something most people would know is Bruce Lee. Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist, right? That was his martial art. Do, way. And these old schools taught. You go into any martial arts school, for the most part, you're going to see something about integrity, about honor, about character, about sacrifice. Maybe you'll hear about fitness. And that's the stuff, like, especially with kids' classes, we're telling the parent, we're going to help instill in your kid all of these cool traits. And we're like, yeah, I want a son or a daughter that's honorable and all these things. Well, you can't be some fat fuck. I'm sorry. It's not me on a high horse. Something's broken, and we have and people get mad at me all the time. I have been a fat fuck. I've not been like morbidly obese, but I've been 20, 30 pounds overweight. And once in my life, I kind of like got in a bad habit of eating too many meals, going to too many business meetings, having the dessert. And I know I've always been good about the quality of food I've eaten, but when you're just consuming too much and you're sitting on your ass all day, the body does what the body does and stores it. So it's a dichotomy of thought. Martial artists too. You see these like old, like what's the weird Russian one where they like touch, they do the like cut shit. What's that one called? You know what I'm talking about. You see that guy, and it's a big fat turd. And I'm saying big fat turd because it paints a picture. And he's like doing this weird flowy hand shit, and the training partners are falling on the ground. It's bullshit. But we see that and we want to believe that. Oh, look, I can be out of shape and I can still do cool shit. No, you can't.
Yes.
You can't look like that and pick your kid up and run 5 miles from the World Trade Center bombing. You can't be in a building that's on fire and the elevators are out and carry your wife down 8 flights of stairs if you look like that. And you could say, well, adrenaline will kick in. Good. Then you'll die of a heart attack in the parking lot as your body's full of all of that adrenaline and cortisol. Like it's bullshit. And then the biggest thing, why am I carrying a gun? Carrying a gun because I want to prevail in violence. This is super simple. Why? Because I don't want to die. Why don't you want to die? Because I like living. Well, then you can't shoot a heart attack. You can't shoot diabetes. You can't shoot cancer. You can't shoot high blood pressure. I can't like do a sub-second draw stroke, and shoot osteoporosis or any of these things. And so it's a dichotomy of thought and it's a fallacy. And I think most guys just want to play with guns and it makes them feel like badasses. And they don't really care about living. They care about having a gun. And that pisses people off. But if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I think if you care about yourself, you're going to eat the right foods. You're going to do the right things to keep you healthy. And then I think most important, all the stuff we've been talking about, your kids are going to see that. My kids don't eat all the foods I eat, but I told them over and over as children, and they could tell you this as adults, fast food, soda pop, shit like that gives you cancer, heart disease, diabetes. I told them that as kids, and we would go get a hot dog or we would go to the movies and have popcorn in a soda once in a while. I don't drink pop. I don't care about it. But they now sometimes eat that shit and it's on them. They're adults. They can do it. I did my duty. I didn't make them scared of it. Again, we would enjoy the stuff in a great level of moderation, but yeah, it's bullshit. You can't see your dick to take a leak and you're worried about a gun. You're full of crap. You're lying to yourself.
Well, Mickey, I'm so glad you said that. One of my big highlights of podcasts last year I recorded was with Jeff Thompson, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's very big in England, but he was this high-ranking karate instructor, and then he started working on the door as a bouncer, and he got in many street fights. And he would say, "Listen, a lot of stuff we're getting taught in traditional martial arts just doesn't work." And he went. This was kind of before UFC was really big, but he was like, immediately, if it's close combat, it's boxing, and then it's some type of grappling. He was doing a lot of judo and sambo, and he was villainized and demonized by a lot of people in the martial arts community. And eventually, with the UFC and the popularity of mixed martial arts, he was kind of justified, and people came around to loving him. And he was invited by the Machados to teach seminars in America, and he had a great career out of it. But that's one thing he talks about is when you talk about traditional martial arts instructors, yes, you might be a 5th degree black belt in this one style. But if you're morbidly obese and you can't move well, then you can't control your waistline, then you're not really a black belt in life. And the ideal should be trying to round out the wheel and to be a black belt in all these different areas. And I love you touched on it, but the most inspirational thing that I've thought about with parenthood, because I read a lot as a new dad, because I felt very clueless and I wanted to learn more about parenting philosophies and especially different cultures, like how they raise kids in, say, for instance, Germany or France is very, very different to how they're raised in America and in England.
That's cool.
And one thing the theme that kept coming back was, it's not what you tell your parents, it's what they see you doing. So we can tell our parents, hey, we can tell our kids, hey, I can tell my son, you should respect women. But then if they see me treating his mom like shit every day, he's going to remember that, not what I say to him. He's going to remember what he sees me doing. So the theme is, if you want to be the best parent, be the best you. And I'm like, man, that's so fucking inspirational. because it's not about what I say as much as what he sees me doing. And he's going to see me trying to fulfill my potential and live my best life. And then hopefully he'll see me doing things like treating his mum well and working hard and embracing failures and learning from them and not being scared to take challenges and risks and all these different things. So I think that's I find that as a dad, as a new dad especially, so motivating. But I'm just so glad you shared that about health, because I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't. You said it perfectly.
And make no mistake, I'm not a picture of health, right? I don't run marathons and shit like you do. I work out. I train jiu-jitsu. I drink some beers, but I like to eat good food, and I think we need to be physically fit, but within reason. I mean, I'm not going to walk in a CrossFit gym and win a freaking CrossFit trophy, but I can probably pick the thing up. I can pull myself up. I can go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what you mentioned that thing, can I grab someone and carry them over my shoulder and run down 10 flights of stairs to get out of a burning building, or things like that you never, like, for me, exercise is because I want to look and feel good. And the benefits of being able to survive in a potentially bad situation is just a bonus. And it's the same with all the, I'm a complete novice at firearms, but I've done 7 or 8 tactical courses. And I love the idea. I treat it like an extra martial art. I've been doing different styles of martial arts since I was, for 31 years now. And so for me, it's a different style of martial art. I don't ever think I'll need it to protect me for my life, but I like the idea that that's an added bonus. And I remember during the weekend of the George Floyd riots, where I lived downtown Chicago, and I had to take my dogs out, and everyone was like, "Don't go outside. They're breaking into apartment buildings. It's absolute craziness out there." And I could hear what sounded like gunshots, explosions, fireworks, whatever it was. It sounded like an absolute melee 2 blocks away. And I'm like, well, I got to walk my dogs out. And that was one time that I had a handgun on me, and I felt real safe. And as I was walking back in my building, there was a beat up car with completely blacked out windows that I couldn't see anything through. And it was driving at 30 miles an hour. And then it got to me and it starts going at 3 miles an hour. And I had my hand in my pocket on my pistol. And I was like, I was ready. If a window comes down, I see a gun, I'm going to shoot back. I didn't know. And it was a 7 or 8 seconds, felt like the longest 7 or 8 seconds of my life. And then it drove off and I went home. But the privilege and the feeling of being able to go in a chaotic situation and protect yourself is priceless. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about giving the gift of martial arts to my son, because I remember at that time there was like a Facebook group that my wife was looking at. She's like, "Lawrence, it's so crazy. Like, there are these people on here, these like old ladies who live by themselves, and they are terrified. They are absolutely terrified. They don't know what's going to happen. I have a 60-year-old doorman who's always half asleep and he weighs 115 pounds and a little glass door. Anyone can walk in it. You live in an apartment building, you think it's so secure. It wasn't secure at all. And the idea of just being at the mercy of a mob is something that I never want to be. So I'm sorry. I had to just say, all the things that one of the reasons, I like you because you're a great, charismatic, fun guy, but all your philosophies are very near and dear to my heart. So that's why I'm so glad we had this conversation.
Thank you. I don't want to ever shoot anybody either. And I've never had to, thankfully. I hope I never have to, but yeah, it's just a tool, man. I carry a fire extinguisher. I carry an axe. I carry all kinds of things in my truck. I'm an EMT. I've got oxygen and an AED in my truck. I don't use that stuff, but if I have to have it, it's there and available. So I think we can go overboard with that stuff. Like we were just in Costa Rica. I didn't have a gun there. So people are like, "What'd you do?" Same thing I did anywhere. I just have less tools available to me. If I came to your house, I'm a lifelong carpenter. I bet you don't have the same tools I do, but I would probably be able to dig around in your garage and get some chores done. And I'd make fun of you and be like, "Why you got this piece of shit thing?" Right? But we could still make the tools work.
Yes.
One of my very best friends who's deceased, his name was Joel Gupton. He was a Green Beret medic. I repeat this often. Joel said our greatest resource is resourcefulness. And so we've all said, man, if I had this thing I had at home, whatever, it might not have nothing to do with violence.
Yeah.
I had to fix a girl's battery on the side of the road. Her battery cable was jumping off and she had a bad alternator. And so the car wasn't running and I had zero tools. I had just bought a new truck. There was nothing. It was just me, and I had my pocket knife, and I used the edge of the pocket knife and I found a little piece of wire on the side. I walked up and down the gravel and I found a little chunk of wire that fell off of something, and I pounded it and peened the lead over with the edge of my knife to get it just to like catch enough that the connection and she could drive home, whatever, not a big deal. But like, I'm so stupid because in my truck, I've got ratchets, sockets. I got pliers. I've got, freaking Leatherman tools. I would have had 30 options to tighten that nut. And without it, it was like, I got a rock and a piece of wire. That's pretty much it.
You just reminded me, there's a real cool jiu-jitsu analogy where they talk about the different belts of jiu-jitsu, and they show the pen knife and the Swiss Army knife, and it just has more tools. And I love that idea of the longer you go.
Oh, I've never seen that.
Oh, it's really cool. You just keep adding to your tools. Brother, I have to run. I've got to get.
I think I'm like the toothpick. That's my jiu-jitsu.
I would like. I want to say this to anyone listening. I got the honor of doing a very hard 10-minute nogi match with you, Mickey, in Costa Rica, and you're an absolute monster and a beast. So,
you're just trying to get more coffee out of me. Thank you.
But brother, I just wanted to give a shout out to our mutual friend Dan Hart. I'm so glad that he got me to come to Costa Rica, because he was talking about you for a while. So you have to meet my good friend Mickey. You guys are going to hit it off, and he was so right. So I'm so glad we met, and I'm going to bug you soon for part 2, because I had a whole list of things I want to talk to you about, and I didn't bring any of them up because we were having such a good time. But I really appreciate you, man, and I can't wait to do one of your courses. And I love your philosophies, and yeah,
you got to come out to Dan's gym and do an open mat one Saturday or Sunday.
Definitely. Well, I'll see you in a couple of weeks, brother.
Awesome, dude.
Appreciate you, Mickey.
I appreciate you having me on, dude.